Tell me how you would check that the brakes are working before starting a journey. Just as you move off, operate the brakes. They should not feel spongy and the car should not pull to one side. Tell me where you would find the information for the recommended tyre pressures for this car and how tyre pressures should be checked. Information will be found using the car manufacturer's guide or manual. Check the tyre pressures by using a reliable pressure gauge when the tyres are cold. Don't forget the spare tyre and remember to fit the valve caps. Tell me how you would make sure your head restraint is correctly adjusted so it provides the best protection for you in the event of a crash. The head restraint should be adjusted so the centre part of the head restraint is at least as high as the eye or top of the ears and as close to the back of the head as is comfortable. Note, some restraints may not be adjustable. Tell me how you check the tyres to ensure they have sufficient tread depth and that their general condition is safe to use on the road. A safe tyre will have no cuts or bulges on the sides. Legally, the tread depth must be at least 1.6 millimetres across the centre 3/4 of the breadth of the tyre and around the entire circumference, and can be measured using a tyre depth gauge. Please note on most tyres there is also a rubber indicator in between various sections of the tread that is set to 1.6 millimetres. Tell me how you check that the headlights and tail lights are working. You don't need to exit the vehicle. This is a tell me question, so you do not need to physically check the lights. Explain to the examiner that you would turn on the light switch, turn on the ignition if necessary, and then walk around the vehicle to check the lights. Tell me how you would know if there was a problem with your anti-lock braking system. A warning light should illuminate on the dashboard if there is a fault with the anti-lock braking system. Tell me how you would check the direction indicators are working. This is a tell me question, so you do not need to physically check the indicators. Explain to the examiner that you would activate the hazard warning lights and walk around the car to see if all the indicators are working correctly. Note, operating the hazard warning lights is the preferred method as the ignition will not need to be switched on. Tell me how you would check the brake lights are working on this car. This is a tell me question, so you do not need to physically check the brake lights. Explain to the examiner that you would operate the brake pedal, making use of reflections in windows or doors, or ask someone to help. Tell me how you would check the power assisted steering is working before starting a journey. If the steering becomes heavy, the power assisted steering may be faulty. Before starting a journey, two simple checks can be made. First, gentle pressure on the steering wheel, maintained whilst the engine is started, should result in a slight but noticeable movement as the system begins to operate. Second, turning the steering wheel just after moving off will give an immediate indication that the power assisted steering is functioning correctly. Steering should be very easy as the car begins to move off if all is working as it should. Tell me how you would switch on the rear fog lights and explain when you'd use them. There's no need to exit the vehicle. To operate the rear fog light, turn on your dipped headlights and ignition if necessary. And check that the rear fog light warning light is on. Explain that fog lights must be used in foggy, low visibility conditions and must be turned off when fog disperses. Tell me how you would switch your headlight from dipped to main beam and explain how you would know the main beam is on. To activate the main beam light, the ignition may need to be switched on or engine started if necessary. Then activate the main beam lights and check that the blue main warning light is on. Open the bonnet and tell me how you would check that the engine has sufficient oil. Operate the primary and secondary bonnet release catches. Open the bonnet and ensure it is firmly secured. Identify the dipstick. Explain that you would remove the dipstick and wipe clean the end where the maximum and minimum level indicator is and fully reinsert. Remove once again and check the oil level against the minimum and maximum markings. If oil levels are low, top up with oil, but make sure not to overfill. Open the bonnet and tell me how you would check that the engine has sufficient engine coolant. Operate the primary and secondary bonnet release catches. Open the bonnet and ensure it is firmly secured. Identify the engine coolant tank and check the minimum and maximum level indicator displayed on the side of the tank. Explain that if the coolant is below the minimum mark, more coolant, water, will need to be added. To do this, explain that you would unscrew the tank cap when the engine is cold and pour in coolant until the maximum mark is reached. Open the bonnet and tell me how you would check that you have a safe level of hydraulic brake fluid. Operate the primary and secondary bonnet release catches. Open the bonnet and ensure it is firmly secured. Identify the brake fluid reservoir and check the level against the high and low markings.